It was a quiet night in the city of Chapico, Brazil, a night that should have been peaceful, but instead became one of unimaginable horror. In the early hours of September 7th, 2024, neighbors awoke to the sound of desperate screams echoing through the hallway of a modest apartment building. "My God, why are you doing this?" A man's voice cried out, raw and terrified. Moments later, there was silence and blood. When police arrived, they found a gruesome trail leading from the bedroom to the stairwell. A man lay motionless at the bottom, his body covered in deep, frenzied stab wounds. 21 times. That's how many times a knife had been driven into his flesh. The victim's name was Valter de Vrito, a 41-year-old champion bodybuilder. Known across Brazil for his powerful physique, his discipline, and his kindness, Valter was admired by many. He had represented his country in international competitions and inspired countless young athletes through his training videos. But that night, all of that ended in blood and screams. Police soon identified the killer, and when they said her name, even the officers on scene hesitated. It was his wife, Andrea Carvalho Ita. As you listen to this story, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe, because what you're about to hear is one of the most chilling cases of obsession, jealousy, and rage ever to come out of Brazil. When investigators pieced together what happened, the details were shocking. Valter was asleep when Andrea allegedly launched her attack. No warning, no argument, just the cold gleam of a knife in the darkness. Neighbors later told authorities they heard furniture being thrown, muffled cries, then the sound of footsteps, heavy, frantic. Through a peephole, one neighbor saw a horrifying sight. Valter stumbling naked and bleeding through the hallway, his muscular frame smeared with blood, trying desperately to reach the stairwell. But Andrea followed him knife in hand. By the time it was over, Valter lay dead near the entrance of the building. Andrea, injured only slightly, was rushed to a hospital for treatment. Tiny cuts on her fingers and arm, a grim contrast to the brutal wounds she had left on her husband. When she was released, police were waiting. But this story, it didn't start that night. It started long before with a love that twisted into something dark. Don't forget to turn on notifications, because this story only gets more disturbing from here. Andrea and Valter had met years earlier and married in 2021. Friends said they seemed happy at first, the perfect couple. But beneath that picture-perfect life, something was wrong. Police later described their relationship as tumultuous, filled with suspicion, jealousy, and explosive arguments. Andrea was convinced Valter was cheating. Whether it was true or not, no one could say for sure. But Andrea believed it, and her belief consumed her. According to one of Valter's friends, he had even told people he was single, despite still being married. Maybe he was trying to escape the chaos. Maybe he was too afraid to leave. In the weeks leading up to the murder, Andrea's behavior grew more alarming. Investigators discovered text messages between the couple, chilling messages where Andrea threatened to kill him. She even sent knife emojis, a digital promise of the horror to come. And then there was the surveillance. Police said Andrea had drilled holes into the walls of their apartment so she could watch Valter without him knowing. She had become obsessed, paranoid, convinced that he was betraying her. But what drove her to the point of no return? What made her pick up that knife and strike again and again? Before the blood, before the screams, there were warnings. Whispers of danger that no one took seriously, not even Valter himself. Andrea Carvalho Ita had once been charming, even magnetic. To outsiders, she seemed like the perfect partner for a man of Valter's success, supportive, affectionate, and fiercely devoted. But inside that devotion was something darker, a dangerous cocktail of insecurity, obsession, and delusion that would eventually explode into violence. If you're watching this right now, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe, because understanding what happened next requires diving deep into the mind of a killer. As their marriage began to crumble, Andrea's paranoia spiraled out of control. She accused Valter of cheating constantly. She went through his phone, stalked his social media, demanded to know his every move. Friends said she would text him hundreds of times a day, angry messages, pleading messages, threats. And then investigators found the digital evidence that painted the full picture of her unraveling mind. Police discovered message logs between Andrea and Valter, chilling texts where she threatened to kill him. In one exchange, she sent multiple knife emojis, followed by the words, "You will pay for what you're doing to me." But that wasn't all. There were audio recordings too, her voice filled with rage, promising vengeance. She even sent him photos of himself asleep, photos taken in the middle of the night, proof that she was watching him, even when he was most vulnerable. Imagine the terror of realizing that the person sleeping beside you was also the one surveilling you, studying your every move, your breathing, your sleep. Police later discovered she had drilled small holes into the walls of their apartment, holes positioned perfectly to give her a view of Valter's private moments. This wasn't love anymore. It was possession. Experts who studied the case called it a textbook example of pathological jealousy, when ordinary suspicion transforms into a dangerous obsession. Forensic psychiatrist Dr. Daniel Bober, who analyzed the case for media outlets, explained that this kind of jealousy doesn't require real infidelity to exist. It feeds on insecurity, delusion, and control. Once jealousy becomes irrational and disproportionate, he said, it crosses into pathology, a sickness that can end in violence. Andrea wasn't just jealous. She was obsessed with control. And when Valter tried to pull away, she interpreted it as betrayal. In the final days before his death, Valter reportedly confided in a friend that he was afraid. He told her that if anything ever happened to him, Andrea was responsible. Those words would later haunt everyone who heard them. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because in Part 3, we uncover what Andrea did just hours before the attack and how artificial intelligence, of all things, became part of this chilling story. But before we move on, let's take a step back. When police examined Andrea's mental state, they discovered something bizarre. She had been communicating with an AI chatbot. According to investigators, she had been using artificial intelligence to vent about her marriage, sending long emotional messages about her depression, her rage, and her belief that Valter was cheating on her. She treated the AI like a friend. She poured her darkest thoughts into it, and those conversations became crucial evidence. She told the AI she couldn't sleep, that she was thinking of hurting someone, that she didn't trust her husband. The bot, of course, responded as if it were a sympathetic friend, reinforcing her emotions, keeping her talking, never realizing the danger behind her words. But in reality, Andrea wasn't talking to a therapist. She was talking to a machine, a mirror that only reflected her anger back at her. And just days later, that anger exploded. By the morning of September 7th, Andrea's obsession had turned into action. Police believe she waited until Valter fell asleep, then picked up a kitchen knife and began stabbing him, over and over again, 21 times. As Valter tried to crawl away, the trail of blood told the story. He was fighting for his life, but she followed, relentless, stabbing even as he tried to escape. When the screaming stopped, Andrea stood over the man she once claimed to love, now lie in a pool of his own blood. Neighbors peered through peepholes in horror. One described seeing Valter's lifeless body slumped near the stairwell, still bleeding. When police arrived, Andrea was covered in his blood. She told them she had acted in self-defense, claiming Valter had attacked her first and that she had grabbed a knife from him. But the evidence told a very different story. There was no sign of a struggle that matched her account. Valter had been asleep when the stabbing began. His wounds, deep, numerous, and frantic, suggested rage, not self-preservation. Meanwhile, Andrea's injuries were superficial, small cuts on her fingers, likely from gripping the knife too tightly. Authorities immediately dismissed her self-defense claim. They called it premeditated murder. But just when investigators thought they'd seen it all, another shocking twist came to light, one that tied Andrea to a violent past she'd been hiding all along. If you're still with us, make sure to like this video. It helps us bring more stories like this to you. When detectives began reconstructing the scene of the murder, the evidence was overwhelming, but also deeply unsettling. It wasn't just a random act of rage. It was planned, deliberate, and deeply personal. The apartment was a mess of chaos, blood on the walls, overturned furniture, broken glass. Yet one detail stood out. On the kitchen table, police found Andrea's phone, open to a series of messages she had sent the day before the killing. In one of them, she wrote, "You'll pay for what you've done to me. You'll see how it feels to be humiliated. In another, she'd sent a photo of a knife with the caption, "This will be the last time you lie." Investigators determined she had bought that same knife only 2 days before Valter's death. To police, that meant intent, premeditation. If you're still listening, make sure you've subscribed, because the next part of this story reveals just how far Andrea went to make sure her husband couldn't escape her. According to prosecutors, Andrea had placed her phone on record mode the night of the murder. She wanted to capture his final moments, a twisted form of proof or trophy. When police recovered the audio, what they heard chilled them to the core. It started with muffled arguing, then a scream, then the sound of repeated stabbing. Valter's voice, pleading, desperate, echoed through the tiny apartment. And then silence. When the recording ended, Andrea could be heard crying softly. But her tears didn't last long. Minutes later, she sent a message to a friend. "It's done. He can't hurt me anymore." Police believe Andrea stayed in the apartment for hours afterward, pacing, washing her hands, even making a call to a relative claiming Valter had attacked her first. But her injuries told a different story. While Valter had been stabbed more than 20 times, Andrea had only minor scratches, the kind someone might get from holding a knife too tightly. One detective would later tell the media she wasn't defending herself. She was finishing something she had already decided to do. Andrea's arrest came swiftly. When officers arrived, she didn't resist. In fact, she seemed strangely calm, detached, as if the magnitude of what she had done hadn't yet reached her. In her first statement, she told police, "I loved him, but love makes you do things." That sentence would haunt everyone who heard it. As the case unfolded, reporters across Brazil began calling it the bodybuilder's murder. The story dominated headlines, not just because of who Valter was, a national athlete and symbol of strength, but because of how he died. People couldn't comprehend how a man of such power and physical dominance could fall victim to someone who once claimed to love him more than life itself. But what truly captivated the public wasn't the murder itself. It was Andrea's demeanor. In court appearances, she showed little emotion. Sometimes she smiled faintly, as though the whole ordeal was a misunderstanding. Other times, she appeared lost in thought, eyes vacant, distant. Psychologists began to speculate about her mental state, whether she was suffering from delusion, paranoia, or something even darker. As the investigation deepened, authorities uncovered Andrea's private notes, scribbled diary entries and handwritten letters she never sent. One of them read, "He thinks I don't know, but I see everything. I hear everything. I'm not crazy. They'll all see I was right." Another, found hidden behind a picture frame, said, "If he can't be mine, he can't be anyone's." By now, prosecutors were building a powerful case. They had the knife. They had the messages. They had the recording. And they had a motive, jealousy, and control turned to deadly obsession. But Andrea's defense would take an unexpected turn, one that would leave the entire courtroom stunned. Before we get to that, take a moment to like this video if you haven't yet. It helps the channel reach more people who love true crime stories like this one, and it keeps you updated when the next shocking case drops. Don't go anywhere. The most haunting part is still to come. When Andrea Carvalho Ita finally stood before the court, the entire country was watching. The courtroom was packed, journalists, cameras, and strangers who had followed the story from the very beginning. The murder of Valter de Vrito had become a national obsession. He was a bodybuilder who inspired thousands, a man of discipline and strength. And now he was gone, taken by the person who shared his bed. Andrea entered the courtroom dressed in white, her hair tied neatly back. She didn't look like someone who had committed a savage crime. In fact, she looked calm, almost too calm. That calmness unsettled everyone who looked at her. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't grief. It was something colder. When asked to confirm her name, she smiled slightly and said, "Yes, I am Andrea Carvalho." That smile sent chills down the spine of everyone present. Her defense attorney argued that Andrea had acted in self-defense. According to their version, Valter had been abusive. He had allegedly threatened her life, and on the night of the murder, he had supposedly attacked her first. They claimed she fought back to save herself. But prosecutors were ready. They played the audio recording recovered from Andrea's phone, the one she left running the night of the crime. The room fell silent as Valter's screams filled the air. The prosecutor didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The audio said it all. It was a brutal, unrelenting assault, not a fight for survival. Andrea sat motionless while the recording played, her eyes fixed straight ahead. No tears, no visible remorse. When the tape ended, the judge asked softly, "Do you recognize those voices?" Andrea nodded and whispered, "Yes." Then she said something that stunned the room. "I didn't mean to kill him. I just wanted him to stop lying." That line would dominate headlines for days. If you're still here, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe, because what happened next took the case in a shocking direction that no one saw coming. During cross-examination, prosecutors revealed something even darker. Andrea had not just sent threatening messages to Valter before the murder. She had also messaged his friends and relatives, warning them that he would regret betraying her. In one message, she wrote, "When I'm done, you'll all know what pain feels like." Her obsession had gone beyond jealousy. It had turned into a fixation. A forensic psychiatrist later testified that Andrea exhibited signs of extreme possessiveness and paranoia. In his report, he wrote, "She believed Valter belonged to her completely. Any perceived betrayal, real or imagined, was an attack on her identity." But even with that psychological profile, prosecutors insisted she knew exactly what she was doing. She planned, she prepared, and she executed that plan with chilling precision. When Andrea took the stand in her own defense, her demeanor shifted. She spoke softly, sometimes crying, sometimes staring blankly into space. She said she loved Valter, that she never wanted to hurt him, but that she lost control when he told her he was leaving. She described hearing voices, seeing things that weren't there. Her lawyer quickly leaned in, emphasizing a possible mental break. But the jury wasn't convinced. The prosecution reminded them of the facts: the knife bought days before, the threatening texts, the lack of serious injuries on Andrea herself, and the most damning of all, the recording of the murder. At one point, the prosecutor turned to Andrea and asked, "If you were defending yourself, why did you keep stabbing him after he fell?" Andrea didn't answer. She just stared at him, her expression unreadable. Outside the courtroom, Valter's family wept as they listened to the testimony. His sister told reporters, "He didn't deserve to die like that. He was a good man. He trusted her. He thought love meant safety." By the end of the trial, the public had made up its mind. Andrea wasn't seen as a victim of abuse. She was seen as a woman driven by rage, control, and obsession. When the verdict was finally read, the courtroom held its breath. "Guilty," the judge declared. "Guilty of intentional homicide." Andrea showed no emotion, no tears, no cries. She simply looked down, folded her hands, and whispered something under her breath. Something no one could quite hear. But one journalist later claimed she said, "Now he can rest." Before we move to the final part, take a second to subscribe if you haven't yet. This story isn't over, and what came after the verdict shocked everyone who thought they already knew the ending. When the sentence was finally handed down, the courtroom was silent. Andrea Carvalho Ita, convicted of the brutal murder of her husband, the beloved Brazilian bodybuilder Valter de Vrito, was led away in handcuffs. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. But Andrea didn't look up. She kept her eyes on the floor, her expression cold and unreadable. The judge sentenced her to 22 years in prison, a punishment many believed wasn't enough for the horror of her crime. Outside the courthouse, Valter's family stood together, their faces marked by grief and exhaustion. His sister spoke softly to the media, saying, "No sentence will bring him back. We just want people to remember who he was, not how he died." For a while, Brazil couldn't stop talking about it. The murder of Valter de Vrito dominated headlines, talk shows, and social media. People debated endlessly about what drove Andrea to kill, a crime that seemed to come from both jealousy and madness. Some said she was evil. Others said she was sick. But everyone agreed on one thing. This was a tragedy that didn't have to happen. If you're listening right now, make sure to like this video and subscribe, because stories like this remind us that even the strongest among us can fall victim to the people they trust most. In the weeks that followed the verdict, strange details began to surface. Prison guards reported that Andrea spent most of her time alone, writing letters to no one. She filled notebook after notebook, pages of fragmented sentences, and drawings of eyes, thousands of eyes, watching her. When a psychologist asked why she drew them, she replied, "Because they're still watching me, even him." She claimed that she could hear Valter's voice in her dreams, accusing her, asking why. One guard told a journalist, "Sometimes, late at night, she talks to herself. She says his name over and over again, as if she's waiting for him to answer." Meanwhile, Valter's family tried to move forward. His mother refused to enter the gym where her son had trained. His friends organized an annual fitness competition in his name to honor his memory and raise awareness about domestic violence, something few people associate with men before this case. One of Valter's close friends, also a bodybuilder, told reporters, "We always talk about women being victims, but men can be trapped, too. They just suffer in silence." His words struck a nerve across Brazil. People began to share stories. Men who had stayed in toxic relationships out of fear, confusion, or misplaced love. Valter's death became more than a headline. It became a mirror showing society a truth it often ignored. That abuse can wear many faces. As the years passed, Andrea's story faded from the front pages. She filed multiple appeals, but none succeeded. Each time, she sat quietly in court, her expression unchanged. When asked if she felt remorse, she gave the same answer. "I loved him. I just wanted him to stay." That single sentence became infamous. It appeared in articles, documentaries, and podcasts as an example of love twisted into possession. Even after her conviction, Andrea maintained a small group of supporters, people who believed she had been pushed to the edge by Valter's alleged infidelity. But most saw her as the face of jealousy turned deadly. If you've stayed with me through this story, thank you. Subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on notifications, because this isn't just a story about one couple. It's a warning about what happens when love becomes control and obsession turns into violence. In the final interviews given by Valter's family, one quote stood out, a message from his sister that still resonates. Love should never hurt. And if you're afraid of the person you love, it's not love anymore. It's a trap. That message is echoed across Brazil and beyond. It's been shared in schools, therapy sessions, and awareness campaigns. For many, Valter's story became a turning point in understanding how abuse doesn't always look the way we expect it to. Andrea remains behind bars to this day, serving her sentence in a women's correctional facility. Reports say she spends her time studying psychology, perhaps trying to understand herself, or maybe trying to rewrite her own story. But no matter how much time passes, the truth remains carved into the hearts of everyone who followed the case. A man known for his strength was destroyed not by a stranger, but by someone who once whispered that she loved him. And that's what makes this story so haunting. It reminds us that danger doesn't always come from the outside. Sometimes it sleeps beside you. So as we close this chapter, remember to share this story, because spreading awareness saves lives. And maybe, just maybe, Valter's death can help someone else recognize the warning signs before it's too late. If you haven't already, subscribe and stay tuned. We share true stories like this one every week. Stories that reveal the hidden darkness behind ordinary lives. Stories that remind us to stay alert and to never take love for granted. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the scariest monsters aren't in the shadows. They're the ones who say, "I love you,"